The CEO had the single dad's truck towed. Just 1 hour later, the board couldn't stop calling back. The phone rang at 5:43 in the morning. Marcus Webb was already awake. He had been awake since 5 because that was the only way it worked. That was the only way the math of his life added up. If he got up before the sun, before the city, before anyone else had a reason to need something from him. He stood in the kitchen of his small apartment in his socks, making 2 lunches at once. 1 peanut butter sandwich cut into triangles the way Maya liked, 1 protein bar, and a cold coffee for himself. The coffee was from yesterday. He did not waste things. Maya was 7 years old and had her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, and she was still asleep when Marcus went in to wake her. She made a sound like a small animal being disturbed from a very important dream. He told her they had to go. She asked why they always had to go so early. He told her because her dad had a big job today. She asked if it was bigger than the last big job. He said yes. She said okay and sat up and rubbed her eyes. Marcus Webb was a network infrastructure contractor. That title meant almost nothing to most people, including people who paid him a great deal of money to do it. What it meant, practically, was that Marcus built the hidden bones inside systems, the architecture that kept servers talking to one another, the bridges that held a company's entire digital life together. He was not the kind of person who got his name on anything. He was the kind of person who made sure everything else worked. Today's job was at Callaway Capital. He had been hired 3 weeks ago through his contracting firm to complete a server migration that their in-house team had started and could not finish. The migration was of a proprietary trading platform, a system that Callaway Capital used to execute trades worth hundreds of millions of dollars every single day. The system was mid-process. Half the data had been bridged to the new infrastructure. The other half was waiting. The whole thing sat like a half-built bridge over a river, and Marcus Webb was the only person who knew how to lay the remaining planks. He had been told to arrive at 7. He always arrived early. He buckled Maya into the back seat of his 2019 Ford F-150 at 6:31. The truck was not new. The paint near the rear wheel well had begun to lift in a way that bothered him more than it should have. There was a small dent on the passenger door from a parking garage pillar 2 winters ago. The child seat in the back was installed correctly. He had watched 3 videos and gone to a fire station to have it checked. That part he had not cut corners on. Maya had her spelling words on a sheet of paper and a granola bar. She did her homework in the back seat every morning during the drive. It had been their routine since she started 1st grade. She would read the words aloud, and he would confirm them from the front seat. And sometimes she would ask what a word meant, and he would explain it as clearly as he could while navigating morning traffic. That morning the word was determined. She asked what it meant. He said it meant deciding you were going to do something and not stopping until you did it. She said, "Oh, like you." He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Yeah, kind of like me." He pulled into the underground parking structure beneath the Callaway Capital building at 6:47. The structure was nearly empty at that hour. He drove slowly, looking for the visitor section his contractor badge was cleared for. He found it, but every space had a car in it already. He drove 1 more loop. Still nothing. He went up to the ground-level lot on the east side of the building. There was 1 open space near the entrance. It was not marked. There was no sign on the wall beside it. There was no painted number on the ground. There was nothing to indicate it belonged to anyone. Marcus checked twice. Then he pulled in, left 1 tire slightly over the painted boundary line because the space was narrower than it looked, and helped Maya out of the back seat. She had finished her granola bar. She put the wrapper in his jacket pocket, because that was what she always did, and he always let her. He held her hand while they walked to the building entrance. The security guard at the front desk, a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a name badge that read Harold, greeted them. Marcus showed his contractor credentials and explained that his daughter would wait in his truck until he moved her to school at 8. Harold nodded. Harold had seen all kinds. Marcus went upstairs to the 3rd floor. He set up his equipment. He reviewed the migration progress from the previous session. He identified 2 minor complications that had developed overnight and began addressing them. At 7.5 minutes past 7, his phone buzzed. It was Maya. She said, "Daddy, a big truck is taking our truck away." He dropped his tablet. He ran. He took the stairs, not the elevator, because the stairs were faster, and because something in his chest would not let him wait for a door to close and reopen. He came out the east entrance at 7:13 and stood on the curb and looked at a clean rectangle of asphalt where his truck had been. Maya was standing on the sidewalk in her school uniform with her backpack on and her paper full of spelling words held against her chest. She was not crying. She was very still, in the way children get when they do not understand something and are waiting for an adult to explain it. He walked to her. He crouched down so they were at the same level. He asked if she was okay. She said yes. She said, "Where did our truck go?" He said he was going to find out. He said it very calmly. Saying things calmly to her was a discipline he had built over 4 years of doing this alone, and sometimes it cost him more than she would ever know. He stood up and took her hand and looked at the empty space. On the 3rd floor of the Callaway Capitol building, his equipment was running. The migration was mid-process. His laptop was open. And the only person in the city who understood what was sitting on that screen was standing on a sidewalk holding his 7-year-old daughter's hand, staring at empty asphalt. At that exact moment, on the other side of the building's glass facade, a black car pulled out of the executive underground garage. It moved cleanly and quietly toward the exit. Through the tinted rear window, visible for only a second before the car turned onto the main road, was the pale profile of a woman looking at a phone. Her name was Diane Hollis, and she was the chief executive officer of Callaway Capitol, and she had made exactly one phone call before her morning coffee that day. She had not looked at the space long enough to see that there was no sign. She had not known there was a child in the truck. She had simply seen something that did not belong in her order, and she had removed it. The car turned. The road emptied. Maya asked if they were going to be okay. Marcus Webb looked down at his daughter. He thought about the $420 it would cost to get his truck back. He thought about the server room on the 3rd floor. He thought about Maya's school starting at 8:15. He thought about all the things that now needed to happen at the same time, in directions that did not align. He said, "Yes, we are going to be okay." He believed it because he had to. Harold was the one who saw them come back in. He had been watching the door since Marcus ran out, because Harold was 61 years old and had worked security in 7 different buildings over the course of his career, and he knew the difference between someone who left for a coffee break and someone who had just received news that changed the shape of their morning. Marcus had left the second way. Harold had noted it without reacting, because that was also part of his discipline. When the east door opened again and Marcus came through it with Maya's hand in his, Harold stood up from behind his desk before they reached him. He did not wait for an explanation. He could read the situation from the way Marcus held himself, the shoulders slightly forward, the jaw set, the careful blankness in his face that was not peace, but the approximation of it for the sake of the child beside him. Harold said, "Come here, sweetheart." He said it to Maya. He said it the way his own mother used to say things, not as a question, not as a performance, but as a fact delivered warmly. Maya looked up at her father. Marcus nodded once. Maya walked around the security desk, and Harold pulled out the rolling chair and let her sit in it and spin it a quarter turn. He had a juice box in his drawer. He had bought it from the vending machine 2 weeks ago for his grandson during an unexpected visit and never used it. He put it on the desk in front of Maya and asked if she liked apple juice. She said, "Yes, please." He said, "Good," because that was the only kind he had. Marcus stood at the edge of the desk and made calls. The first call was to the towing company. He was on hold for 9 minutes. When someone answered, they gave him an address 11 miles away and a dollar amount that he did not repeat aloud because Maya was 4 feet away. He wrote it on the back of his hand instead. He stared at it for a moment after he wrote it. The second call was to his ex-wife, Carla. It went to voicemail. Carla worked early shifts at a hospital and was almost certainly already in the building and away from her phone. He left a message. He explained the situation without detail. He said he would figure it out. The third call was to his contracting supervisor, a steady man named Greg Albright who answered on the second ring and said nothing for a moment after Marcus finished explaining, which was not nothing. It was the sound of a man thinking very fast about a problem with a lot of moving parts. Greg said, "How much is the fine?" Marcus told him. Greg said he could send it through petty cash, but it would take until the end of the day. The towing compound's payment location, Marcus already knew, Closed at noon. Greg asked if there was another way. Marcus said he was working on it. Greg said okay. Greg said also, and here his voice shifted slightly, took on a different weight. The third floor is calling. Marcus said he knew. Greg said the system is showing errors. Marcus said he knew that too. Greg said how bad is it? Marcus said it depends on how long he was away from it. He ended the call and looked at his watch. It was 7:31. He had been away from the server room for 18 minutes. He thought about what could happen to a mid-migration server system in 18 minutes without active monitoring. The thought was not pleasant. He looked at Maya. She was spinning slowly in the chair, juice box in hand, reading her spelling words. Harold was pretending to review a log sheet but was actually watching her with the quiet satisfaction of a man who missed having small children around. The lobby was bright and cool and safe. Marcus took the elevator up to the third floor. The server room was a long, narrow space with humming racks of equipment along both walls, and a constant low temperature that the building maintained for the sake of the machines. Marcus had spent the better part of 2 weeks in this room. He knew its sounds the way a doctor knows a patient's chart. What was normal, what was not, what silence in the wrong place meant. The silence in the wrong place was there when he walked in. He sat down at his workstation and began reading the diagnostic logs. The migration had not crashed. It had not failed outright, but it had stalled in a way that was subtle and serious. A kind of error that looked like nothing from the outside and was everything from the inside. The bridge between the old system and the new one had partially collapsed. Not fully, partially. Enough to make the new system unreachable from the outside. Not enough to trigger the building's automated IT alerts, which meant that somewhere above him, in the glass-walled offices of Callaway Capital, the trading platform had been showing a loading screen to its users for the past 22 minutes. Marcus pulled up the architecture file. He found the collapsed bridge point. He identified what had caused it, a timing mismatch that had developed in his absence. Exactly the kind of thing he had been there to prevent. He began writing the correction. At 7:58, the in-house IT director, a man named Garrett Finch, opened the server room door and said, "What is going on down here?" Garrett Finch was in his mid-40s and wore his shirts tucked very tightly and had the particular energy of someone who had been managing people without fully understanding what they managed for long enough that he had started to believe the management was the expertise. He had a team of 7 IT professionals who were collectively brilliant at maintaining systems and completely unable to build new ones. He had not been involved in hiring Marcus. He had not been happy about Marcus's presence in the building. He referred to Marcus in meetings as the outside guy. Marcus did not look up from his screen. He said, "The bridge collapsed at the synchronization layer." He said it the way he said most technical things, clearly, without decoration. He said he was fixing it. He said it would take approximately 40 minutes if no one interrupted him. Garrett said, 40 minutes? He said it like the number was personally offensive. Marcus said yes. He said 40 minutes was optimistic. He said if there were interruptions it would be longer. Garrett said the platform had been down since 7:30. He said people were asking questions upstairs. He said Diane Hollis had already been notified. Marcus said, "I understand." He said it without inflection. He kept typing. Garrett stood in the doorway for another moment, with the look of a man who wanted to say something more but could not find the argument. Then he left. Marcus kept working. His fingers moved steadily across the keyboard. His eyes moved between 3 screens. The server room hummed around him. In his jacket pocket was a granola bar wrapper that his daughter had put there that morning on the way into the building, when everything had been ordinary. Downstairs, Maya finished her juice box and asked Harold if he had any paper. Harold gave her the back of a printed memo. She began writing her spelling words in her best handwriting. Harold watched her and thought about his own grandson, and about the way children made any space feel more like something worth being in. Marcus had been back at his workstation for 21 minutes when his phone rang again. It was Greg. Greg said, "I just got a call from the 3rd floor. They want to know if you can speed it up." Marcus said no. Greg said he understood. Greg was quiet for a moment and then he said, "Also, Marcus, I made a call about the towing fee." He said he had spoken to someone who could get the funds moved faster. He said it was being handled. Marcus stopped typing for exactly 1 second. Then he said thank you. Then he kept typing. By 9:15, the server room door had opened 4 more times. Twice it was Garrett. Once it was someone from Garrett's team who said nothing and left. Once it was a woman Marcus did not recognize who stood in the doorway for a moment, looked at him, looked at the screens, and left without speaking. She was calm in a way that was different from Garrett's energy. She took in the room the way someone takes in a situation they need to understand, rather than a situation they need to control. Marcus noticed the difference. He did not stop working. What Marcus did not know, because he was in the server room and not upstairs, was what had already begun to happen on the floors above him. The trading platform had now been unreachable for 1 hour and 47 minutes. The board of directors was being called into a conference room. And Garrett Finch was about to say a sentence that would change the shape of the next several hours for everyone in the building, a sentence he had avoided saying for as long as he possibly could, and which he finally delivered with the expression of a man stepping onto ice he was not sure would hold. The conference room on the 6th floor of Callaway Capital was all glass on one side and had a view of the city that was probably meant to feel impressive during normal meetings. On that morning, it felt like an accusation. The sky was bright and clear, and the city was moving at its usual pace outside the windows, indifferent to what was happening inside. Diane Hollis sat at the head of the table. She had been in this chair for 6 years. She had built this firm from a mid-size regional investment house into something that appeared in financial publications with some regularity. She was 53 years old and had not reached the position she was in by tolerating disorder or making excuses for it. She had a particular way of sitting that made the chair look like it had been designed for her. Straight, still, present, with both hands flat on the table in front of her. Around her sat 6 members of the board. On her left was the chief financial officer, a woman named Patricia Osei, who had joined the firm 4 years ago from a larger institution and who had the kind of intelligence that expressed itself mostly as quiet and occasionally as the single sentence that ended a conversation. On Diane's right was the head of operations, a man named Charles Wren, who was thorough and anxious, and who had already filled 3 pages of a legal pad with notes since arriving. The others were present in the way people are present when they are waiting for the person with the most information to speak. Garrett Finch stood near the screen at the end of the room. He had prepared nothing. This was visible. Diane said, "Tell me where we are." Garrett said the platform had been down since approximately 7:30. He said the in-house team had identified the issue as occurring in the server migration that was currently underway. He said the migration was being handled by an outside contractor. Patricia Osei said, "Which contractor?" Garrett said the firm's contracted infrastructure specialist. He said the name. He said Marcus Webb. Diane said, "And where is he right now?" Garrett said he was in the server room. He said he was working on the fix. He said he had estimated 40 minutes when asked, but that had been given around 8 o'clock. Charles Wren looked up from his legal pad. He said, "So he's been down there this whole time?" Garrett said yes. Charles said, "And why was the system unmanned between 7 and 7:30? Garrett said that Mr. Webb had stepped away briefly. Diane said, "For what reason?" Garrett looked at the table for a half-second. It was a brief look, the kind that does not go unnoticed, in a room full of people who are paid to notice things. He said, his vehicle was towed. The room was quiet. Not the quiet of shock, but the quiet of people rapidly processing a piece of information and following its implications to where they led. It was the kind of quiet that arrives when something that seemed unrelated to a problem reveals itself to be the center of it. Patricia Osei said, "His vehicle was towed from this building?" Garrett said yes. Patricia said, "This morning?" Garrett said yes. "Early this morning." Diane did not move. She kept both hands flat on the table. She said, "By whom?" Garrett said, "The building's towing service." He said it was a routine enforcement call. He said the vehicle had been parked in a reserved space near the east entrance. Diane said, "Was the space marked?" Garrett did not answer immediately. In that half-second of silence, Patricia Osei set down her pen. It was a small motion. She placed it on the legal pad carefully, parallel to the edge of the paper, and then she looked at Diane with an expression that was entirely composed and entirely unambiguous. Charles Wren had stopped writing. The man to his left, a board member named Oliver Grant, who had said nothing since the meeting began, leaned back in his chair a fraction of an inch. These were small movements, but the room had shifted. Diane said again, "Was the space marked?" Garrett said, "Not clearly, no." She understood then. She understood all of it in the order it had happened. The vehicle, the morning, the reason the server room had been unmanned during the window that had caused the platform to stall. She understood it with the specific discomfort of a person who has made a decision quickly and privately, and is now watching that decision become a matter of record in a room with 6 other people. She said nothing for a moment. She looked out the window. Patricia said, "What is the current status of the system?" Garrett said Marcus was still working. He said he had not received an updated estimate. Patricia said, "Is there anyone else in the building who can complete this work?" Garrett said no. Patricia said, "In the city?" Garrett said, "Not within a time frame that would—" He stopped. He said no. Patricia picked her pen back up. She did not write anything with it. She held it. Oliver Grant said, "How much has been lost?" He was not asking about money in a vague sense. He was asking about a specific number, and everyone in the room understood that. Charles Wren said, "We have been offline for 2 hours and 19 minutes during market hours." He looked at his notes and said a number. Then he said, "That is if we come back online within the next 30 minutes. He said, "Each additional 30-minute window adds." Diane said, "I understand." The room was quiet again. Diane had been a precise and decisive person for her entire professional life. She had made difficult calls without hesitation. She had restructured departments and ended partnerships, and redirected entire strategies in the time it took other people to think about it. That quality had never failed her. Precision had always been the right tool. It was only in that moment, sitting at the head of that glass-walled room with the bright city moving outside, that she began to understand the difference between precision and narrowness. Precision was a tool. Narrowness was what happened when you applied precision without looking at the full picture first. She had seen an unmarked space with a vehicle slightly over a line. She had not looked at whose vehicle it was. She had not looked at what that person was there to do. She had removed something that did not fit her order. She had not known what it was holding up. Patricia said quietly, "We need him to finish. And after he finishes," she paused, "we need to have a different conversation." She said it without drama. She said it the way she said most things, which was as a statement of fact that had already been decided. Diane said, "Yes." She said it to the table. Then she looked up and said it to the room. "Yes." She reached for her phone. Charles Wren had been watching her face during all of this, with the careful attention of someone who had known her for a long time. He had seen her make hard decisions. He had seen her absorb difficult news. He had not seen this particular expression before. It was not regret, exactly. It was something more specific than regret. It was the expression of someone who was very good at a great many things and had just discovered the exact shape of the thing they were not good at. Oliver Grant looked at his watch. He asked if someone was going to go down to the server room and give the contractor an update. Charles said he could go. Patricia said she would go. She said it in a way that made it clear it was not a question. She stood up, straightened her jacket, and picked up her phone and walked toward the door. She stopped with her hand on the door and looked back at Diane. She said, "Does he know why he's alone down there?" Diane said nothing. Patricia said, "I will handle it." She opened the door and left. Garrett remained standing at the screen. He appeared to be wishing he was somewhere else. Charles Wren wrote something on his legal pad. Oliver Grant looked out the window. The city kept moving. Diane sat at the head of the table with her hands flat in front of her and said nothing at all, which was unusual for her, and which the remaining board members understood was not silence but something more like accounting. A woman going back through a morning's decisions and finding the one that had cost more than she had calculated. On the 3rd floor, Marcus Webb was 40 minutes into a repair that required total focus. He had not eaten anything. He had not had water. He had checked his phone once, not for messages from the board, but for a message from Harold confirming that Maya was still okay. Harold had sent 3 letters. Yes. Marcus had looked at those 3 letters for exactly 2 seconds and then put the phone face down and kept working. He did not know that Patricia Osei was stepping into the elevator. He did not know what had just happened in the room above him. He only knew the screen in front of him, and the system under his hands, and the fact that it was broken and he was going to fix it. Marcus heard the door before he looked up. He had developed a sense, over days of working alone in that server room, of what different entries sounded like. Garrett opened the door the way someone opens a door they feel entitled to, quickly, with full weight behind it. The junior IT staff member opened it the way people open doors when they're trying not to be noticed. This entry was different. It was measured. It was the sound of someone who had decided to come down here, and had decided exactly how. He looked up. Patricia Osier was standing in the doorway of the server room in a slate gray suit jacket and dark trousers, with her phone in one hand and an expression that was not what he expected. He had expected someone from management. He had braced for urgency, for pressure, for another version of Garrett's energy with better vocabulary. What he saw instead was someone who had already assessed the room and was not in it to perform anything. She said, "How is it going?" He said, "Better than it was an hour ago." She said, "How long?" He said, 20 minutes if it holds. Maybe 30. She nodded. She did not say good, or great, or we need it faster. She said, "Okay." She said it like it was information she had received and was filing correctly. Then she said, "Your daughter is downstairs." He said, "I know. Harold is with her." She said, "Harold is good with her." He said, "Yes, Harold was good." She was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone with nothing to say, the silence of someone choosing what to say from several options. She said, "I want you to know that we are aware of what happened this morning." She said it plainly. She did not frame it softly or dress it in corporate language. She said, "Your truck was towed from an unmarked space." She said, "That should not have happened." Marcus kept his eyes on the screen. He was still typing, not to ignore her, but because the system required constant attention and stopping would cost him time he did not have. He said, "I appreciate that." She said, "When you are finished here, the fee will be covered. All of it." She said, "A car will take you to the pound and your vehicle will be returned to you." She said, "Your daughter can remain in the lobby with Harold for as long as she needs to." He said, "Thank you." She said, "I also want to ask you something." She paused. She said, "Is there anything you need right now, before you finish? Water? Food? Anything?" He looked up then, not because the question surprised him. It was a reasonable question, but because of how it was asked. Without the film of professionalism that made courtesy feel like a transaction. She had asked it the way someone asks when they actually want the answer. He said, "Water would be good." She took a bottle from the small table near the door. There was always water in the server room, he had known that. But the morning had moved too fast for him to remember that he was a person with physical needs, and set it near his workstation without crossing into his workspace. Then she said something that he did not expect. She said, "I have 2 daughters." She said it without preamble, without connection to anything preceding it. She just said it. She said, "The older one is 9. The younger one is 6. She said, "My husband does school drop-offs on Tuesdays and Thursdays because I cannot always make it." She said, "Some mornings it goes perfectly, and some mornings it does not." She did not say anything after that. She did not connect it to him, or to his situation, or to Maya downstairs. She simply offered it and left it there. Marcus said nothing for a moment. His fingers kept moving. Then he said, "Maya's word this morning was determined." Patricia said, "What did you tell her?" He said, "I told her it meant deciding you were going to do something, and not stopping until you did it." Patricia looked at him. She said, "That is a very good definition." Then she said, "I will let you work." She said she would check back when it was done. She said if he needed anything before that he should call Harold, and Harold would reach her. She walked to the door. He said, "Miss Osei." She stopped. He said, "The space had no sign." He said it without heat. He said it the way someone states a fact that they feel should be on the record. He said, "I checked before I parked." She said, "I know." She said it simply. She said, "That is part of what we will be addressing." Then she left. Marcus drank half the bottle of water in one go. He set it down and looked at the screen, and got back to work. For the next 19 minutes he did not think about the morning or the towing company, or the $420 written on the back of his hand. He thought about the system. He followed the architecture he had built, his own design, his own logic, the structure he had put together from scratch over 3 weeks. And he found where it had broken, and he fixed it the way you fix something you made, with authority, without guessing, with the particular focus of someone who knows exactly what each piece is supposed to do. At 11:47, the bridge came back up. The synchronization layer reconnected. The data finished transferring. The proprietary trading platform, which had been unreachable since 7:30 in the morning, showed a green status light on his diagnostic panel. He sat back in his chair. He looked at the screen for a long moment, not with relief exactly, with the feeling of something completed. He picked up his phone and sent Greg a single message, "Done." Greg replied in 11 seconds with a row of letters that was not professional, but was genuine. Marcus put the phone in his pocket and stood up and rolled his shoulders and picked up his water bottle. He walked out of the server room. Patricia Osei was in the hallway. She had a phone to her ear. When she saw him come through the door, she ended the call mid-sentence and said, "Is it up?" He said yes. She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Then she opened them and said, "Thank you." He said, "I will need to run some final checks this afternoon to confirm stability." She said, "Of course." She said, "Whatever you need." He said he needed to get his daughter first. She said, "Absolutely." She said the car was already arranged. It was waiting in the east lot, the same lot from which his truck had been towed that morning. She said the driver had the address of the pound, and the paperwork was handled. She said she had asked Harold to let Maya choose something from the breakfast spread in the executive lounge. She said she hoped that was okay. Marcus said that was okay. He took the elevator down. When the doors opened in the lobby, Maya was sitting at Harold's desk eating a chocolate chip muffin on a paper napkin, with a care that suggested she had been told to be neat. She had her spelling list in front of her. She had written each word 3 times in her best handwriting. She looked up when she heard the elevator and saw her father and said, "Daddy." She said it the way children say a parent's name when they have not been scared, but are very glad the waiting is over. He crossed the lobby and crouched down, and she put her arms around his neck, and the muffin stayed on the napkin. Harold looked at them over the rim of his glasses with the expression of a man who had seen a great many things in a great many buildings, and still found some of them worth looking at. Marcus said to Harold, "Thank you." Harold said, "She's a good kid." He said it like a verdict. Marcus stood up and took Maya's hand and walked with her toward the east exit. As they passed the elevator bank, Diane Hollis was coming out of one of the cars. She was alone. She was not on her phone. She saw Marcus before he saw her, and for a moment she did nothing but look. He looked up. They were about 15 feet apart. She was still. He was still. Maya was beside him with her muffin and her spelling list and her backpack and her school uniform, entirely unaware of the specific weight of the space between the two adults. Diane said, "Mr. Webb." He said nothing. He waited. She said, "I want to." She stopped. She said, "What happened this morning was wrong." She said it without qualifiers. She said, "I made a call without having the full picture." She said, "I am sorry." He looked at her for a moment. He did not look away, and he did not fill the silence with anything. He let the apology sit the way an apology should sit when it is real, without immediately being absorbed or forgiven or moved past. He let it be what it was. Then he said, "I appreciate that." He did not say it was okay. It had not been okay. But he said what he could say honestly, and that was what he said. He kept walking. Maya walked with him. The east door opened and the morning air came in and they went through it. The towing compound was 11 miles east of the city center, in a neighborhood where the streets were wide and flat, and the buildings were low and practical. The driver of the car Patricia had arranged was a quiet man named Dennis, who did not attempt conversation, but was efficient and careful with the route. Maya sat in the back seat next to her father and watched the city pass the window. She had finished the muffin. She had her spelling list folded in her jacket pocket. She asked if they were going to get the truck back. He said yes. She asked if it cost a lot. He said it cost some. She said she was sorry the truck got taken. He said it was not her fault. She said she knew, but she was still sorry because it had been their truck, and she liked their truck. He said he liked it too. The man at the compound office was named Derek. He was broad and sun-weathered, and handed Marcus the paperwork across a counter with the efficiency of someone who processed dozens of these a day, and was not personally invested in any of them. Marcus reviewed the form. The total owed was listed at the top. Beneath it, in blue ink, someone had stamped, "Paid in full, account of Callaway Capital LLC." He stared at that stamp for a moment. He signed where he needed to sign. Derek handed him his keys. The truck was in Lot C, row 7. Marcus found it without difficulty. It was exactly as he had left it. The dent on the passenger door, the lifting paint near the rear wheel well, the child seat in the back exactly as it was supposed to be. He stood beside it for a moment before he unlocked it. Just stood beside it, hand on the door. Not for any particular reason, except that sometimes when a thing is returned to you after being taken away, you need a second to confirm it is real. Maya climbed in and buckled herself into the child seat. She pulled out her spelling list and smoothed it on her knee. She looked at the word at the top of the page. She had been looking at this list all morning. She had written each word 3 times at Harold's desk. She knew every word on it now. The last word on the list was fairness. She had asked Marcus about it that morning during the drive-in, before everything happened, and he had been focused on the traffic and had said they would talk about it later. She asked him now. She said, "Daddy, what does fairness mean?" He had just gotten his keys back. He had just signed a form that said paid in full. He had just stood in a parking lot and said, "I appreciate that," to a woman who had taken his truck, and he had meant it without forgiving it, because those were 2 different things, and he was old enough to know the difference. He looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. He said, "Fairness means that what happens to you should be based on who you are and what you do, not on things that have nothing to do with you." She thought about it. She said, "And was today fair?" He thought about Harold and the juice box. He thought about Patricia Osei saying, "I have 2 daughters," without connecting it to anything. He thought about the paid in full stamp, and the car that had been waiting, and Maya eating a chocolate chip muffin at a table in the executive lounge. He thought about Diane Hollis in the lobby saying, "I am sorry." He said, "Parts of it got fixed." Maya seemed to accept this. She wrote the word on her list one more time, slowly and carefully, making each letter exact. He started the truck. That afternoon, back at the building, Marcus ran the stability checks on the trading platform. The system held. No secondary errors, no residual instability. The migration was complete. He packed his equipment methodically, the way he always packed it. Cables first, then power supplies, then monitors, each thing in its correct case. He had done this at the end of every job for 9 years, and he did it the same way every time. There was a satisfaction in the routine of it, in the order of it, that he had come to rely on. Garrett Finch appeared in the server room doorway as he was finishing. Garrett looked at the packed cases. He looked at Marcus. He said, "It is stable?" Marcus said yes. Garrett said, "Good." He said it carefully, like a word he was choosing. Then he said, "I want you to know that the situation this morning was not something I—" He stopped. He said, "I did not know the parking situation was unclear when I came down to the server room." He was trying to say something and was doing it poorly. Marcus looked at him. He said, "I know." He said it because it was true. Whatever Garrett was or was not, he had not made the parking call. Garrett nodded. He started to leave and then stopped and said, "You built a good system." He said it quietly, like it cost him something. He said, "The architecture is clean." Marcus said, "Thank you." Garrett left. Marcus picked up the last case and turned off the light and walked out of the server room for the last time. Patricia Osei met him at the elevator. She had a white envelope in her hand. She said, "This is the reimbursement for the towing fee." She said it also covered the time he had lost during the incident. She handed it to him. He took it. She said, "We would like to bring you back for the next phase of the infrastructure upgrade." She said it was a larger project, 6 weeks minimum, and that Greg had already been contacted about the contract terms. She said, "We would also like to formally recommend your firm for the annual maintenance contract." She said, "That recommendation carries some weight." He said, "I appreciate that." She said, "I also want to say," and here she did not shift her tone. She stayed exactly as direct as she always was, "that what happened this morning should not happen to anyone who comes into this building to work." She said, "We are making changes to the parking policy," she said. "There will be clear signage on every reserved space by end of the week, and visitor spaces will be properly expanded." He said, "That is a good change." She said, "It is a basic change." She said it evenly. "It is a basic change that should have already been in place." She looked at him. She said, "Go get your daughter." He almost smiled. He said, "She is at school." Patricia said, "Good." She said it like she meant it. Then she turned and walked back down the hallway. He took the elevator down. Dennis was still at the east entrance. Apparently had been told to wait, which said something about how Patricia Osei ran things. But Marcus waved him off. He had his truck. He was fine. He drove to Maya's school. He was there 40 minutes early, which meant he sat in the pickup lane with the other parents and waited. He did not mind the waiting. He had spent the entire day wanting to get to this moment, and now that he was here, he was content to simply sit in it. When the school doors opened and the children came out in their clusters and pairs, he spotted Maya before she spotted him. She was walking with a girl from her class named Sophie, the two of them in what appeared to be a very important conversation about something. Then Maya saw the truck and her face changed the way it always did. The complete, uncomplicated happiness of a child seeing exactly what she wanted to see. She ran. She pulled the door open and climbed in and buckled herself and said, "You got the truck back?" He said yes. She said, "Did it cost a lot?" He said no. "Actually not today." She said, "How come?" He said, "Because someone paid for it." She said, "Who?" He said, "A woman named Patricia." Maya said, "Is she nice?" He thought about it. He said, "Yes, she is." Maya looked out the window and said, "I finished all my spelling words." She said, "I got determined and fairness, and I know what they both mean now." He said, "Good." She said, "I think today was kind of both of those words." He said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You were determined, and then the fairness part happened at the end." He looked at her in the rearview mirror, 7 years old, school uniform, backpack in her lap, completely at ease with the logic of the world. He said, "Yeah, that is exactly right." He pulled out of the school lot and into the street. The afternoon was clear, and the light was the warm, flat gold of the late afternoon, and the city moved around them at its usual pace, indifferent and full, and ordinary, in all the ways that felt, on a day like this one, like more than enough. In the Callaway Capitol building, Diane Hollis sat at her desk on the 6th floor. The trading platform was running. The market day was ending. The numbers from the morning were recoverable. Barely, but they were. Her assistant had put a revised parking policy memo on her desk for review. She had written it herself, earlier in the afternoon. She picked it up now and read through it. It was thorough. It covered everything it needed to cover. It would go out to the building management team before the end of the day. She put the memo down and looked out the window. The city was settling into the early evening. Cars moved below. People walked the sidewalks. The east lot was visible from here, or the edge of it, the same lot she had looked down at that morning and seen a vehicle she wanted moved. She could not see the parking space from here. She could not see whether there was a sign where there had not been one this morning. But she knew that by tomorrow morning there would be. Some lessons are learned in conference rooms. Some are learned in glass-walled offices looking down at parking lots. Some are learned in the space between one decision and its consequence, in the 4 hours it takes for a chain reaction to complete itself and reveal exactly what the first link had been. Diane Hollis was a precise woman. She would remain a precise woman. But she would also, from that morning forward, be a woman who paused for 10 extra seconds before making a call she could not take back, who looked a little longer at the full picture before removing something that did not fit, who understood that order and fairness were not the same thing, and that efficiency, without attention to the person inside the situation, was not a strength but a very clean-looking flaw. She had not sent a formal apology. She had said "I am sorry" in a lobby to a man with his daughter, and she had meant it, and she had let that stand as what it was. Patricia had not replied to the memo. Diane had not expected her to. Some things do not need replies. They need to be changed, and the changing is the reply. Outside, the city moved. The truck was on a highway somewhere, heading home. carrying a man and a girl and a day that had been many things, hard and unfair and repaired and, in the end, honest. Maya had her spelling words. Marcus had his keys. The system was running. Some days begin with the wrong thing happening to the right person. What matters is what the next hour looks like, and the hour after that, and whether the people with the power to make it right choose to use that power before they are cornered into it, or after. Today, one of them had waited too long. One of them had not. That difference, quiet as it was, would be remembered for longer than the morning that caused it. End.